I am Clara Wagner, 34 years old, and I grew up in a gray concrete apartment block in Prenzlauer Berg, East Berlin, where the walls still whispered of surveillance and the S-Bahn rattled past like clockwork. To outsiders, my family represented the perfect post-reunification success story. My father, Dr. Heinrich Wagner, was chief of cardiology at Charite Hospital. My mother, Dr. Greta Wagner, ran the psychiatric ward at the same institution. But behind our reinforced door with its 3 locks, our home felt more like a clinical trial than a family. I used to hide in the building's old coal cellar, counting the minutes until I could escape their experiments. Even as a child, I knew I was less daughter than case study. My parents weren't just cold. They were scientists, and I was their longest-running experiment. I still remember my 10th birthday vividly, sitting alone at our kitchen table while my parents worked a double shift, only to find a medical textbook wrapped in pharmacy paper with a note. Happy birthday. Begin with Chapter 3 on cellular biology. Knowledge is the only gift that matters. Mama and Papa. The book smelled of formaldehyde and disappointment. They never asked what I dreamed about. They only measured my academic progress. Perfect scores in biology, chemistry, physics. Weekend lessons in anatomy, using real specimens they'd bring home. The rest of their time was consumed with surgeries, research papers, or conferences in Munich, where children weren't welcome. I can't recall my father ever reading me a story, or my mother asking about my friends. They always had clinical explanations. Emotional attachment interferes with objective reasoning, or social relationships are secondary to professional development. Over time, I learned to hide my interests and stop expecting warmth from those who measured love in test scores. The only person who saw me as human was my grandmother, Oma Ingrid Muller. She lived in a tiny apartment near Alexanderplatz, a relic from DDR times who refused to relocate. She wore hand-knit sweaters, made plum cake from memory, and always smelled of lavender soap and tobacco. Instead of quizzing me on the periodic table, she'd take me to flea markets at Mauer Park, teaching me to spot valuable items among junk, to negotiate prices, to see opportunity where others saw garbage. You don't have to follow their prescription, Liebchen, she'd whisper in her raspy voice. There are many ways to heal the world. Some wear white coats. Others wear whatever the hell they want. I treasured those words more than she knew. Every weekend, I'd beg to stay with her instead of attending the extra tutoring my parents arranged. They rarely refused, probably relieved to focus on their research without distraction. Those days in her cluttered apartment were my only escape. I learned to evaluate antiques, understand market values, and recognize that commerce could be its own kind of science. Everything changed when I was 15. My parents decided to accelerate my medical education. They enrolled me in an intensive pre-medical program, arranged shadowing opportunities at the hospital, filled my schedule with anatomy labs and biochemistry prep. But I had a secret. During my time with Oma Ingrid, I'd started a small business selling vintage medical equipment online. Old stethoscopes, antique surgical tools, discontinued pharmaceutical posters. What began as a way to earn pocket money became an obsession. I understood market dynamics instinctively, could predict trends, spot undervalued items. By 16, I was making more monthly than my father's residence. I hid the money in accounts my parents didn't know existed, reinvested profits, studied business forums at night while they thought I was reviewing medical journals. The thrill of a successful deal gave me more satisfaction than any perfect test score ever had. The confrontation came during my final year of gymnasium. Over dinner in our sterile dining room, my parents presented my future like a diagnosis. Your acceptance to Charite Medical School is guaranteed, my father announced. I've spoken with the admissions committee. Your internship begins this summer. I've arranged for you to assist in my psychiatric research, my mother added. Early exposure to published papers will strengthen your residency applications. I set down my fork carefully. I'm not going to medical school. The silence lasted so long I could hear the neighbor's television through the wall. Excuse me, my mother said, her voice dropping to its clinical register. I've been accepted to WHU for business and entrepreneurship. I'm building a medical supply company. I've already incorporated, have 3 employees, and contracts with hospitals in 4 cities. My father's face flushed red. You will not waste your intelligence on commerce. We've invested everything in your medical education.
No, incorrecte.
You've invested in your vision. I've invested in mine. And mine is already profitable. What followed was war. They cut off my funds, canceled my health insurance, threatened to evict me from my room. but they'd trained me too well in clinical detachment. I moved in with Oma Ingrid, expanded my business from her kitchen table, and ignored their escalating tactics. They sent colleagues to convince me. They had the hospital priest discuss my moral obligations. They even attempted to have me psychologically evaluated, claiming my rejection of medicine indicated mental instability. But I'd learned from the best how to document everything, how to remain calm under pressure, how to dissect their arguments with surgical precision. The business exploded during my university years. What started as vintage medical equipment evolved into comprehensive hospital supply chains. I identified inefficiencies in procurement, negotiated bulk contracts, streamlined distribution. My company, MedLogistic GmbH, grew from 3 employees to 300. We supplied everything from surgical gloves to MRI machines, always faster and cheaper than traditional suppliers. By graduation, we had contracts with half the hospitals in Germany. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The daughter who refused to be a doctor now determined what tools doctors used. My parents maintained their silence, but I heard from colleagues they monitored my success with the same clinical interest they'd once applied to my grades. The turning point came when Chairite faced a critical supply shortage. A cyber attack on their primary vendor left them without essential surgical supplies. Cancellations mounted, patients suffered, and the media smelled blood. The hospital board, desperate for solutions, discovered that the fastest alternative supplier was MedLogistic, the company their own doctor's daughter owned. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon. I walked into the Chairite boardroom, wearing a designer suit that cost more than my father's monthly salary. The board sat rigid, my parents among them, forced to witness their experiment's unexpected results. MedLogistic can deliver all required supplies within 72 hours, I presented calmly. Our terms are standard, with one modification. Doctors Heinrich and Greta Wagner will personally sign the contract, acknowledging MedLogistic as Chairite's preferred supplier. The room erupted. Board members whispered frantically. My mother's jaw clenched. My father's hands trembled slightly, the surgeon's ultimate shame. "This is extortion," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "This is business. You taught me that emotion has no place in professional decisions. I'm offering the best terms from the best supplier. Your personal feelings are irrelevant to patient care." They signed. What choice did they have? Lives depended on those supplies. As their pens moved across the contract, I saw something break in their eyes. The realization that their experiment had succeeded, just not how they'd planned. Within a year, MedLogistic became the largest medical supplier in Germany. We expanded internationally, acquired competitors, went public with a valuation that made headlines. I hired hundreds of doctors, not to practice medicine, but to consult on product development, efficiency improvements, supply chain optimization. Many were Chairite alumni who whispered about the Wagner daughter who'd built an empire from spite. My parents still worked at the hospital, now dependent on supplies I provided, forced to see my company's logo on every instrument they touched. The power dynamic had reversed completely. They'd wanted to control my future through medicine. Instead, I controlled medicine's present through commerce. But the real twist came later. During a routine audit, we discovered irregularities in Chairite's ordering patterns during my parents' shifts. Further investigation revealed they'd been skimming supplies for years, selling to private clinics for personal profit. The evidence was meticulous: falsified inventory reports, shell companies, Swiss bank accounts. They'd been criminals long before I'd been their disappointment. I sat in my corner office, overlooking the spree, holding reports that could destroy them, and made a choice. I called them to MedLogistic headquarters, to the boardroom where I now decided fates. They arrived together, aged by more than years, wearing the white coats that had once been their armor. "Sit," I said, gesturing to chairs across from me. "We need to discuss your theft." My mother tried to maintain composure. "I don't know what you're implying." "Stop," I interrupted, sliding the evidence across the table. "I have everything. Every falsified order. Every redirected shipment. Every euro you stole while lecturing me about ethics." My father's surgical hands shook visibly now. "What do you want?" "What I've always wanted," I said. "The truth. Why did you really push me toward medicine? Was it pride? Control? Or did you need another doctor in the family to help cover your crimes?" The silence stretched until my mother finally broke. We needed someone we could trust. Someone who would understand that sometimes survival requires flexibility. "You mean someone you could corrupt," I clarified. Someone whose medical license you could use for your schemes. We gave you everything, my father said weakly. The best education, every opportunity. You gave me a prison disguised as privilege. I cut him off. But you also gave me the tools to escape it. Your clinical detachment taught me to see people as problems to solve. Your emphasis on documentation showed me how to build airtight cases. Your corruption revealed that the medical profession you worshipped was just another business, often run by criminals in white coats. I leaned back, studying them the way they'd once studied me. Here's what happens now. You resign from Chairite, citing health concerns. You'll receive modest pensions, enough to live quietly. In exchange, I don't forward this evidence to prosecutors. You'll also sign agreements never to practice medicine again, never to contact my employees, and never to claim credit for my success. You're destroying us, my mother whispered.
No, y correcte.
I'm hiring you as consultants to my ethics committee, reviewing supply chain integrity. You'll spend your remaining careers ensuring other doctors don't do what you did. Consider it community service without the prison sentence. They signed, of course. What choice did they have? The student had become the teacher, the experiment had become the scientist, the daughter had become the judge. They work for me now, 2 doctors among hundreds who answer to the woman who refused to join their ranks. Oma Ingrid lived to see it all. Before she died, she held my hand in the same apartment where I'd learned to see value in discarded things. You did what I never could, she whispered. You turned their cold hearts into cold profit. And somehow that's its own kind of healing. She was right. Medlogistic now runs free clinics in underserved areas, provides supplies to refugee camps, funds medical research without the corruption that poisoned my parents' careers. We heal more people than I ever could have as a single doctor, reach more lives than any surgeon's hands could touch. The Wagner name, once synonymous with medical excellence, now represents the business of medicine itself, efficient, profitable, and utterly unsentimental. I am Clara Wagner. They wanted me to be a doctor, to wear their white coat, and inherit their sins. Instead, I became the one who decides which coats get worn, which instruments get held, which doctors get hired or fired. My parents trained me to be clinical, and I became the ultimate clinician, diagnosing problems in supply chains instead of patients, prescribing efficiency instead of pills, performing surgery on broken systems instead of broken bodies. They wanted me to join their profession. Instead, I bought it. And every doctor who works in a German hospital now, including them, works with tools I chose, systems I designed, ethics I enforce. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't becoming what your parents wanted. It's becoming the thing they never saw coming, their boss. The medical conferences still whisper about it. The Wagner paradox, they call it. How the daughter who rejected medicine became its most powerful non-medical figure. But they miss the real lesson. My parents believed in hierarchy, in the sacred nature of their profession, in their right to control others' futures. They never understood that every hierarchy can be restructured, every profession can be disrupted, every parent can become dependent on the child they tried to dominate. They wanted to create a doctor. Instead, they created a CEO. And in the end, I did exactly what they trained me to do. I diagnosed a problem, developed a treatment plan, and executed it with surgical precision. The only difference was that the patient was the entire medical system, and the disease was doctors like them.